So, so that's kind of the goal setting activity. Okay. So into the concept of sustainability. Reducing our consumption and the resulting waste stream is a big part of learning how to live more sustainably. There's 5 parts. The first is rethink, then reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. So first, so it's the 5 R's instead of the 3 R's, right, from school. So first you want to rethink. And here's one thought about that. Everything we acquire has to eventually be gotten rid of somehow. If it's food, we consume it. Otherwise, it eventually ends up either being recycled or dumped in a landfill. So before you acquire something, rethink what'll happen to this when I'm done with it. And when we start thinking about that, sometimes we realize we don't need nearly as much stuff as we thought we needed. The second is to reduce. So as you're thinking about what you're going to do with it when you're done with it, maybe you realize you don't need it, and that will reduce your purchases. That'll save you money, it'll save valuable resources, and it decreases what ultimately goes into the landfill. Third, think about reusing. Maybe you or your friends can find a way to reuse something. Is there another purpose for that container? Can it be upcycled to something more valuable? Can someone else wear your gently used clothing? I keep a box by my kitchen door that says free to a good home, and I put all kinds of stuff in it that I come across that I don't need, and it's amazing. People come in my house and they go, oh, I've been looking for that. So you can get rid of a lot of things that way through reusing, and it goes on to a happier home. The fourth is recycle. Note that recycling is not the first option for when we're done with something. It's the fourth. Recycling is great if in fact it can actually be recycled, but not everything can be. For example, something made of multiple materials usually can't be recycled. But recycling is certainly better than leaving it in the landfill. Recycling reuses resources, it saves on the destruction of the natural environment, saves energy, has all kinds of positive aspects to it. And the fifth is rot or composting. We have a couple of presentations this evening on composting, and it's an amazing way to turn food waste and garden waste into great fertilizer for your garden. So if you're not composting, maybe after tonight, you'll think about wanting to do that. So continuing on, I chair Haynes Friends of Recycling, as Tracy said. We're celebrating 20 years of helping the Chilkat Valley reduce waste and recycle. We're a nonprofit with a half-time employee. We recently added another part-time person. Our employees handle the day-to-day work of baling and preparing recycling for shipping. Everything that we take for recycling is sent out for recycling. Nothing is landfilled. If we say we'll take it. Now, sometimes people leave us garbage, and that's a whole different story. In 2019, we sent out 300,000 pounds for recycling. Currently, we have approximately 300 families, individuals, businesses, organizations that are members. Our special events and our public education is all done by volunteers. We recycle all kinds of metal, all kinds of paper, except the low-grade mixed shiny paper like magazines. There's no market for that now globally at all. We also recycle number 1 and number 2 plastic, printer cartridges, all for free. Our collection bins are open 24/7 every day of the week, every day of the year. We also recycle other items for a small fee at specified times, and that would include our electronic recycling, appliances like refrigerators, washers, dryers, stoves, freezers, and so on, fluorescent tubes, and fishnets. For more specifics, you can visit our Facebook page, which is Haynes Friends of Recycling, or our web page, which is haynesrecycle.org. Or you can call the Recycling Center, and that number is 766-3000, and there's a message phone there. If nobody answers your call, then it shows up on my computer, or you can call me at home, and that's 766-2185. And if you haven't been to the recycling center, and I think most of you have, we're located at 2.5 Mile Small Tracks Road. So this is January, almost the end of it. It's a no travel COVID year. What in the world does one do to stay entertained? So in addition to Haynes Friends Recycling, I also chair the Solid Waste Working Group here in Haynes. And in a partnership between the two groups, we're putting together a guide for reducing the waste stream called Reduce Our Waste Together, or ROW Together. The guide, currently in development, has the following things in it: a materials guide that lists everything that can be reused, repurposed, composted, and recycled in Haynes, and where to take it. A business and resource guide that includes all the information about the businesses and what they will take for reuse, repurposing, recycling, composting. It's going to include a home waste audit activity, so how to find out what you're throwing away and what of that could be used other ways. An activity called Eco Guilt, which is the name I've put on this goal setting activity I described at the beginning. And then we'll also have a list of all of the borough ordinances that relate to reducing waste. So that includes the existing plastic bag ban that we got through a little over a year ago, the bear attractant ordinance that's now working its way through the assembly, the littering ordinance, which we're going to review, the burning ordinance, which we're going to review, and maybe some others. So if you'd like to help with the research and development of the Reduce Our Waste Guide, please let me know. And you can contact me at 766-2185 or aronson@aptalaska.net. I've been working with reducing waste and recycling in Haynes for 15 years. And I have to say, doing the research for this, I'm amazed how much I've been learning in the process. So anyway, that's what I have to share with you this evening.
All right, thank you, Melissa. And next up we have Betsy Van Berg. Betsy Van Berg. And Betsy has operated a pottery business in Haynes since 2010. And in the summer, she works as a marine biologist. Every summer, she heads out to study sea lions, and she got tired of seeing plastic entanglements on the sea lions she studies. So this year, she decided to add a refillery business. In her personal life, she buys a lot of her food and non-food items in bulk. So she decided to offer this option to folks to refill containers and buy less plastic, which reduces the plastic waste found in the ocean. All right, welcome and thank you, Betsy.
Thank you, Tracy. So thank you so much, Tracy, for putting this on. I think it's a great idea. And thank you, Melissa, for your beginning there, because mine certainly follows in. So yes, continuing on what Melissa said, I think about the 5 R's, and the reason for the refillery was I was hoping to reduce our consumption of plastics. And as Tracy said in the introduction, my hope was to reduce plastics that go into the landfill. Sometimes I forget they find in the rivers and ocean and on beaches. I've been out on the outer coast and where I work in the summer, and just find beaches that are just loaded with plastic bottles. It's really discouraging, as well as wildlife. I work with sea lions, and I've seen a lot of entanglements. So it would be nice to reduce our plastic for that reason, if not for many other reasons as well. So again, the plastic and packaging are the main thing. So I have bought food in bulk for a number of years. And so this spring, even before the COVID, I guess I started thinking about how I could do it here and not do a store. And so I bought a trailer, and I buy in bulk, and both food and non-food items. So food items such as liquids as olive oil, honey, maple syrup, molasses, that sort of thing, and dry foods that, sometimes that comes in more often. I guess flowers might come in like paper bags and so forth, but there's other things that can come in plastic bags too. And so I buy bulk, nuts and seeds and nut butters. And then I buy non-food items such as dish soaps and Dr. Bonner shampoos. So hopefully I buy in big enough quantities that reduces like the small shampoo bottles that a lot of us were used to buying for years. So I buy that stuff by bulk, and I have a trailer, and I put it on the trailer there. I have shelves, and I took it to the farmer's market this summer. And it worked great. Seemed like it was, well enough, I thought, for the first year. And seems like people were receptive. I mean, it was amazing, actually. A number of people that came up and said how, oh, I remember how I used to buy like this all the time, and I think back in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, and how many times I would go to a natural food store and, buy, bulk stuff. And so somewhere in there, it seems like over the many years, it got lost a little bit. I mean, there still are some places, but obviously not enough. And we've turned to more packaging and more plastics in our society. So anyway, so I have jars available as that I can refill for people, but I also encourage people to bring in jars so that, again, we reduce plastic containers and also paper bags as opposed to maybe plastic bags. And a lot of people come with their own cloth bags. I also have reusable bags as well. So the winter time right now, since I'm not in a store, I actually have a place here, Melissa's, that I have all my stuff. And so I have people, if they want items from me now, they can text me or call me, and I will come here and fill the order and then make arrangements for them to pick it up, usually like at my pottery studio. And they can I have also have a spot there that they can drop off their jars and paper containers or whatever they want me to refill. So I guess that's about it on my refillery and why I went into it. If you're interested in hearing anything more about it, you can contact me at 314-0344. You can text or leave a message. And I do put a list of my items on Haynes Community website under commercial services, so people have an idea what I have to offer. And if there's other things you would like, I'm really open. I'm somewhat limited in space. And also the other thing that limits me is where I buy my bulk. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of items that don't come in bulk. And so, I'm limited that way. And because, I'd like to get like 5 gallons or more, or, 25 to 50 pound bags of something so that it makes it worth it. And that we have less packaging. So anyways, there we go. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Betsy. All right, next is Jenny Reitz. And Jenny is the owner and founder of Haynes Compost and a certified compost operator through Compost Technical Services in Vermont. Haynes Compost is a free composting service for everyone in Haynes. And her big goal for everyone is to know how easy and important it is to compost and for Haynes to be a leader in community-led climate action. All right, thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Tracy. So it looks like everyone here really is quite comfortable with composting, so I don't need to probably explain it too much. I figured I would just say really quickly how it works in case someone wasn't sure and in case anyone asks you, because that's the best thing that anyone could do for me right now is share with your friends. Like everyone here is probably already doing it. Maybe we'll have people watch the recording, but I feel like these people know how to do it. So if you can just spread the word, that's amazing. So the way it works is every Friday and Saturday from 9 to 5 p.m., I put out big black bins at our house and people can come and drop off their food scraps for free. And it's that simple. They can drop off their businesses scraps, their offices scraps. There's no restrictions. I will take everyone. I pretty much take everything. If you're wondering what I take, HaynesCompost.com has a ton of resources. Right on the front page, there's a thing that says click here for a list of what we take. It's meat, bones, fish scraps. I really don't like bioplastics like compostable forks. No, thank you. But paper plates and stuff, definitely. And even the green bio bags that people use to line their compost bins, definitely. Yeah, and just a lot of people, some people like to compost some of their stuff with me, and that's great. Like people bring me only their fish or only their duck carcasses from hunting, which is great. Like I love that. And some people compost just seasonally with me. Like they don't want to deal with a frozen compost pile in the winter, which is fine. I mean, you could also do that at home because it'll just unfreeze and you can get it going again. So I support winter composting, but also it's available. I'm year round. And if anyone is interested in starting and hasn't composted before, the best place to start is haynescompost.com. There's a whole big list of everything you might want to know. There's my email address if there's something on there that wasn't answered. And I love emails and messages. I don't get bored talking about compost. So describe the local compost market. You mean, Clay, for sales, compost sales? It's great. My problem so far has been my capacity to produce compost because I'm using only my arms, and I had a poor sifting system last year, so I was hand sifting, and it wasn't very like. My goal was to convert the food to a stable soil, not necessarily to get like a sifted product out. So one winter project this year is to fix up my trommel so that I can maybe bring in volunteers to sift for me, and they could be paid in compost and they could just keep the compost moving. Because I came to it actually from a waste reduction standpoint, not as a gardener. And so I am interested in seeing the transformation from what people see as trash to something that's beautiful and usable, but I don't really care if it goes for free out the door, if it goes on my ground. I just kind of like pushed it all around my garden last year because I didn't know or really care what to do with it. And people ask me like, have you got it tested? Do you have like, what's this? I don't know. I'm like, I don't know. It looks like dirt. It smells like dirt, and my stuff is growing in it. So that's as fancy as it is. It's a goal for sure to be able to get to the point where I'm selling it, because then you have a business. Like right now I have a business that is more of a nonprofit, and that's okay because it's a community service for me. Like that's why I do it, and because I love it, because it's so cool. But I could see how to be more sustainable, it would be good to get that product out the door. But yes, to answer your question, people are really excited about it. And I did sell a couple, like 20 or 30 buckets last fall, and people were asking for more, and people were buying it again. So I guess they liked it. And yeah, let's see. Thank you. I'll take more questions if people had questions. Oh, another thing I wanted to add, that if anyone was interested in helping me, the number one thing is to spread the word to people that might not know. The number two thing is now that Recycle Center isn't able to take low grade paper, I am welcoming any paper that comes to me shredded. So if you have a shredder at home or a shredder at work or know someone with a shredder, it doesn't have to be like, they're pretty cheap even to buy one. I love shredded low grade paper of any kind, as long as you're not putting in those plastic windows that your mail sometimes comes in. That's the only thing that I don't want. But like cereal boxes are amazing, and pasta boxes and magazines are fine with me. So I know a lot of that stuff is going in the trash right now, and I wish I could handle it more. That's another goal. Yes, Melissa, I do take magazines and shiny paper. Some shiny, mostly like packaging paper sometimes is coated in plastic, and I don't want that. But magazines, the inks are soy-based now for the most part, and I feel comfortable with it. If I was a master gardener, I probably wouldn't. But because I'm coming to it from just a waste reduction standpoint, and because it's not my primary carbon source, I feel like it gets diluted. I like what the product that's coming out, and I feel like I'm open about the products that are going in. So anyone that's buying or using my compost on the other end, sorry about the children, they understand, and they're fine with it. And anyone who's very concerned about what goes into their stuff is probably making it at home. So I will continue to do that probably until I decide otherwise. And I have more concerns about what's in bioplastics now than shiny paper. yeah. Guess that's it. I don't know. Any more questions?
Well, thank you, Jenny. And also I just also I've been to your website and I appreciate that there's more than just compost too. I feel like you have a good supply of like reusable things like the silk dental floss and just like nice things that don't require plastic. So that's a really nice service that you offer too.
Yes, and we actually moved all that to the Haynes packing shop this year, so people can buy that stuff in person now. I decided it'd be better for people to see it in real life. So
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Jenny. And to follow up Jenny's presentation, we have a few representatives from the high school. Lydia and Isella are here. And these are two very motivated high school students. They're here to talk about their action project to encourage composting in the high school. And they said they're very proud of the education they've received since kindergarten about the importance of composting and waste management. So thank you, Lydia and Isella.
Hi, yeah, I'm the student body president in the high school, and even before the pandemic, our high school lunch waste system has been different in the high school from the lower grades because of our location. And one second. Sorry. And so while the middle school and elementary have been composting with Starvin Marvin, the high school hasn't been getting up there to compost. And the pandemic has only worsened this because our lunch program uses so much more waste products. Like we used to just get trays, but now we have paper bags and those compostable clamshell containers for our food. So we just, as a student government, we felt that this needed to change and that we needed to put in a system for composting and recycling all this extra waste we are producing as a school. We're a huge building and we produce a lot of waste. You just look in the trash after lunch and it's just like 2 huge bins filled, and you just like your heart sinks a little bit knowing that we produce that every day. So because Starvin Marvin hasn't been running this year, we went to Jenny for our compost. And so we've been starting a program that we recycle aluminum and plastics and all of our containers. So I'm gonna turn over to Isella and she'll talk a little bit about our process.
Hi, my bandwidth isn't doing so great, so I'm going to keep my camera off if that's all right. Hi, I'm Isella, and I'm on the compost committee for the student government. And so this year has actually been really exciting. I've been really glad that I'm part of this because, you know, exactly what Lydia says, you kind of, once you start thinking about it and you think about all the waste that we create, you can't not think about it anymore. And so, I think our first priority with this was to make it convenient for students. And because I think we've often had those little square containers around, and we had the bags for recycling the color paper for a while, but it just seemed like students weren't taking advantage of them as often as they could have. And so this year we wanted to color code the recycling and the compostable things, or color code the plastics and the aluminum bins so students had access to them, and they were in various places, the main areas that students are, so it's convenient. As well, we made little bins in the classrooms for when students had been eating, they could empty the food that they didn't consume into those bins, and they would have a spot that, you know, right when they're putting their stuff away, bins are there. In some of the classrooms that they're eating, bins are there. We really wanted to make it convenient and obvious that this is something that we're doing. And so with that, on a week, the NAS and the student government have teamed up to go in pairs with a teacher advisor sometimes. said, bring compost to Jenny that we collect in the bins, and the recycles and of the aluminum and plastic to the Haynes Recycle Center. And yes.
Yeah, she cut out a little bit, but we, with the NHS and student government together, we make it so that each participant in those programs will go like once a month to take the stuff out every week. So we just have teams of 2 that take the compost and recycling, sort it, and bring it to Jenny and the recycle center. So. I think that's everything for us.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Lydia and Isella. And I think it's really great. I was actually just listening to setting New Year's resolutions and how important it is to take away the friction. And so it seems like your strategy of having the bins very accessible is removing that friction and making it just easier for students to recycle and to compost. So very cool project. All right, so next up is Clay Good. And Clay grew up in Auk and Taku Kwan, where he taught high school science for 25 years. Now he works for Renewable Energy Alaska Project as the regional energy catalyst for Sustainable Southeast Partnership. Clay lives in Deschutes as much as he can, which is most of the time. And here he is tonight. So thanks for joining us, Clay.
Thanks so much for the invitation. It's nice to become more and more part of the Haynes community. As Tracy pointed out, I do try to be in Haynes as much as I can. And I did take advantage of the COVID time to spend all my time in Haynes since March until just about a month ago. And so I really enjoyed my time in the community and getting a feel for the rhythm of the community during this strange time, but it's so beautiful there. And having lived in Southeast all my life, I really understand how outstanding Haynes is. I guess I'm going to practice here sharing my screen and ask you for feedback in terms of what you see. All right. You see my presentation there all right?
Yeah, it looks good.
Great. Well, there's just another picture, reason why I love Haynes. That's sort of out in front of my place there, down by the river. So it is a pleasure to be here. And I wanted to give you a little overview of the energy profile of Haynes and where we might be able to chart a future path that's more sustainable. And I'll just go ahead and roll here. I worked for the Renewable Energy Alaska Project for the last 3 years in our 3 main energy sectors, which are electricity, heating, and transportation. I'd like to kind of keep those 3 main sectors in mind as I proceed today. Our work with REAP is in the areas of technology, funding, policy, and people. I should say that increasing clean energy requires these pillars. REAP's work is generally in working on funding structures, working on policy structures, and then building capacity. And so that's part of my work. I'm one of the people that works toward energy literacy for the organization. And the technology piece, we don't do the technology, but we know the smart people who do, so we're connected to them. I do want to acknowledge that I have spent my life and have been grateful for the life I have spent 53 years in Auk and Taku Kwan, and more recently now in Chilkat and Chilkoot Kwan. It's been a blessing in my life, and I'm grateful for the culture here and for the life here. And that's part of what leads me to my other work as part of the Renewable Energy Project is my work with the Sustainable Southeast Partnership, where we work together. I'm gonna move my thing here. The SSP is a growing network of diverse organizations and businesses and individuals working together to support Southeast communities to develop their cultural, ecological, and economic sustainability. Energy is central to all cultures and economies, and so REAP has joined with the Sustainable Southeast Partnership in their efforts to create greater energy independence for Southeast communities. And so we do that by our commitment to what we call the triple bottom line. That is people, planet, and profit as our ethos for our efforts in the areas of local businesses, energy independence, food security, fisheries, and forestry. Try to take all of these approaches and bring to those an ethos that's driven by people, planet, and profit. And to sort of put our energy analysis in perspective across the state, I'll begin by stating the obvious. Our state is huge geographically, and its challenges are enormous. This picture here is showing the range and diversity of our energy infrastructure across the state is a publication that's put out by the Renewable Energy Alaska Project and can be found on our website, which is called the Alaska's Renewable Energy Atlas, and it's free. And when we think about energy in our community, it's also good to kind of look at how Haines compares to other communities across the state. There's about 200 microgrid communities. I mean, when we think about electricity in America, we're usually thinking about a massive interconnected grid where everything's connected. And Alaska is just the opposite of that. We are hundreds of islands all trying to make it work. And there's some challenges there, as you can imagine. Now we have at least 80 communities that have some form of renewable energy in part of their energy supply, which sort of makes Southeast sort of an obvious outlier in the rest of the state and how much we enjoy our abundance of renewable energy. I was speaking earlier about the sectors of our energy economy. Space heating is such a big part of it. And residential energy, it's the biggest part of a home energy budget anywhere across the state. So here's some pie charts for geographic regions across the state and sort of how they differ in their space heating budget. Here in Southeast, not surprisingly, we're the lower of the group at about 69% of our home energy budget goes just to heating space as opposed to water or appliances. Our Southeast way that we approach heating in our homes, I think we all kind of understand. We've all been around here long enough. Fuel oil is sort of king here. Some communities rely more on wood, and I think that Haines would certainly feature more so here than with Juneau because of its access to wood resources. And much of Southeast is the same as true because of the hundreds and thousands of miles, I should say hundreds of miles of logging roads and thousands of miles of second growth in various stages of growth just provides so much renewable resource for heating. It's obviously not combustion free, but it is certainly more renewable than what you'd say oil is, and can support a local economy as well, as opposed to importing oil and exporting the money that goes with that. So here's a little snapshot of how we heat our homes in Southeast and what part of the energy sector that represents. The one piece that's really going to be missing from my discussion today is where the transportation sector fits into this. Those numbers are hard to come by. Oil and fuel distributors, that kind of information is proprietary for them, and they don't necessarily let anybody know how much fuel they have sold. But when I talk to you about these other analyses, these are done through the Alaska Energy Authority, and they have some databases that allow us to come up with some pretty decent numbers to help us guide our thinking. I want to talk about the next sector, and that's Haines energy, electricity sector. And this is with some data presented from the Alaska Energy Authority. And I've spent some time trying to wrap my mind around the data. I think I've got most of it figured out. There'll be a couple of weak spots, and see if you can call me out on those. But I think I've got this stuff figured out enough to help you if you have any questions. This slide shows you the total sales of electricity in Northern Lynn Canal in tens of thousands of megawatt hours in both Skagway and Haines. And so you kind of see the distribution here of the population in the community in terms of total customers and how the energy is distributed between those two communities. Because you can't really talk about Haines energy without talking about how we are critically tied to Skagway. This slide also demonstrates the average cost of residential electricity for both Haines and Skagway. And you can see the lines are sort of indiscernible until we get to here, when you see a Haines price spike go up for a particular year. And this is just to indicate the vulnerability that Haines has in terms of times when it is maybe cut off from its supply of clean hydro. It has to fire up its diesels, and diesel costs money. And what you're looking there is some kind of indication of something in your system you don't want. You don't want to be burning oil if you don't have to. It's obviously nice to have those systems there when things break down and have an emergency backup, but it's just an indicator of what maybe some of the issues and things that could be more resilient in our system could possibly be. And here's another graph showing the difference in the seasonal summer and winter peak demands for hydro and for diesel electricity across the two communities. Actually, I should say that's probably just for Haines. Oh, rats, maybe going back. And then this graph here to the right talks about the total energy available for these communities. We're just ignoring 2020. That's not like there's half the energy. It's just like that's just a data void there. So you get an idea. This is how much energy could be produced in the combined systems for those years. So that's sort of the total capacity for the diesel and hydro together, not that they were actually producing that. This graph at the bottom shows the actual disposition of energy in megawatt hours for Haines for these years across the decades, the last 2 decades here. And the dark represents the hydro draw, and then the light blue at the bottom represents how much diesel was burned during that year of that total amount of energy. And so you see some variability in the number of times and the amount of energy supplied by diesel. And we can probably go back to the Chilkat Valley News and look in the headlines and kind of figure out what's going on in those years that caused those dynamics. But just a picture there of the variability of supply and demand, and what your sort of capacity is for electricity of all sources here in the Chilkat Valley. This graph is again just to sort of show the variability in the amount of diesel used in Haines since 2000. And so this top one here to the right shows the amount of diesel generation in megawatt hours. And then the graph just below it shows how that correlates to the total diesel consumed. You know, the more diesel you consume, the more energy you're producing, and vice versa. So just showing you that there's this variation in the amount of diesel that is consumed from year to year. This isn't talking about the cost of diesel. It's just a quantity statement here. And this graph over here about diesel efficiency is, yeah, that's sort of a weak spot for me. But the amount of time a diesel runs and how efficiently it's running, how often it's drawn upon, these kind of affect its efficiency. And there's some other issues that go along with that as well, like how fast you spool it up when you need it, the energy. They kind of have to leave them idling quite often in case you need extra capacity in some places. So I'm not quite certain what to make of the efficiency. I'm sure that that an engineer would say that's just a snapshot of the data, and he would talk to us about what the real efficiency looks like. But from the backup here, the idea here is that our diesel efficiency is not consistent and perfect, and it's not our best source of energy if we have other options. It's just sort of the take-home message for that particular graph. And then these graphs do show us a little bit about the cost dynamics. Not the price per se, but the price and the amount of diesel used to produce heat. They just sort of measured it in millions of BTUs or in kilowatt hours, just interchangeable units. The take-home picture again is the dynamic that we see here, that is variable, and that when you have events that require you to use it, and when you have times when the fuel oil is expensive, that's going to affect your rates. And so in asking the question, how can Haynes improve its energy profile and reduce its energy costs sustainably? I just want to run through some ideas here. It's nice to think that we can put in some tide generators or some wind turbines or these other ways to bring more energy to the grid. And I hope that that is the truth as we move forward as a community. But the least expensive way is always going to be energy efficiencies. It's far cheaper than pursuing new energy. And so as a community, I would offer that as always as a priority. Let's find out what we can do to use our energy better and wiser as we move forward in bringing new energy sources to our communities. And then I want to throw by you this phrase that's being used in the arena a lot these days, largely due to a young man's work down in Sitka. Andrew Gallagher did a lot of research in this area of what we call beneficial electrification, and it's kind of the way it sounds. We talked about our transportation sectors, and we talked about our heat and electricity sectors. You know that most of our heat is using fossil fuel. You know that most of our transportation is using fossil fuel. And so not that much of what we do is using electricity. You talk about your total community energy consumption. And so the question is, how much of our transportation and heating sectors can we move on to our electrical grid in a way that benefits the consumer, if not immediately, at least over time? How can we do it in ways that support a more robust and resilient electrical grid? How can we do this in ways that improve the quality for the consumer that's using the energy and reduce environmental harm? So this is what I mean. We mean by beneficial electrification. So you have to hit all those buttons to some degree to say this is a win-win-win-win for everybody, and we should move forward with it. And I think that the Haynes and society in Alaska in general is sort of an interesting nexus in our ability technologically to start addressing this. And you've probably heard about heat pumps and electrical vehicles, so that's where I'm going to go. Heat pumps are a form of electric heat, but they are not like resistance heat, where you just have like this, bar that gets hot next to your floor. That's incredibly inefficient. Heat pumps are refrigerators in reverse. And it may not sound like 40-degree air is very warm, but you'd have to admit that it's warmer than 30-degree air. And so with that understanding, you have heat in that air you can harvest. And that's what a heat pump does. It harvests and concentrates residual heat from your ambient air outside, and using compressors and heat exchangers and condensers, migrates that heat to the inside of your house, where there's a radiator and a fan blowing and moving that heat into your home. It's really kind of that simple. You can steal the heat from the air. You can steal the heat from the ground. You probably noticed when they put in the big warehouse and marine facility on the waterfront this last year that they installed hundreds and hundreds of feet of tubing underneath that development. And they're going to be drawing their heat from the ground there. Or you can draw it from water as well. I would suggest to you that as you watch energy move forward in future decades, we'll be taking the heat from the ocean. It's far more abundant and easy to harvest than a lot of other forms of heat. So these are different ways you can steal heat from the environment, concentrate it, and move it to where we want it, to move it from where it's hot to where it's not. When you talk about using heat pumps in Haynes, it's always a question, any place actually, is, well, is it affordable? It certainly is in Juneau, but our electricity down here is dirt cheap. And that's not so everywhere else. So you have to kind of compare the cost of oil compared to the cost of electricity and do some big math, which I don't do, but I know the people that do. And Robert Deering with the Alaska Heat Smart folks in Juneau just turned me on to this information yesterday. This is hot off the press. And so if you look at this graph, you notice that for an equivalent amount of heat, I think it was like 1 million BTUs, I forget what it was, but these are all the same amount of heat. It costs like nearly $80 to use resistance heat. And then, it's about $30 to heat with oil, and just a little more than 30 to heat with an air source heat pump. So wood is obviously cheap, and I think that's at about $2.75 a cord is I think what that was calculated at. And pellets, which is a kind of a moving target. Those prices seem to change a lot too. This gives you an idea of how it costs to compare to start moving your heat sector onto the electric sector. It's not quite there competitively with oil yet, but cost isn't always the only thing that's important to folks. Sometimes not having an oil tank and its liability and those kinds of associated things are worth it, the extra nickel it costs to heat your home with electricity using a heat pump. And then again, the price of oil is really low right now. There will be a day probably in the future when oil goes back up again and people will be saving a lot of money using a heat pump. But just the idea that you have to kind of do the math on these things a little bit. Haynes is not there yet in terms of saying, yeah, definitely is going to save you money just on a nickel per nickel basis, but it's darn close. And there may be other reasons to move that direction. If you want more information and resources, the folks at Alaska Heat Smart and Alaska Power and Telephone have great resources and information. I think you should check out Alaska Heat Smart in particular. They are there to navigate the world of heat pumps and energy systems for you so that you want to do this. They've got a lot of great programs that they're enviable, and we hope to bring some that energy to Northern Lynn Canal. And they just made their presentation to a number of folks here in the Northern Lynn Canal just last night. Another element of beneficial electrification has to do with moving our transportation sector onto the electric grid. And so electric vehicles are obviously growing in popularity. If you've been to Juneau, you notice that Nissan Leafs are replacing Subarus for the folks downtown and everywhere else. There's hundreds of them in Juneau because electricity is so inexpensive. But even at the price of electricity in Haines, it's economical to have an electric vehicle. It's going to be a trick to get the infrastructure into the community. So you have charging stations that are convenient for folks, but this is all sort of what's moving right now. The Alaska Electric Vehicle Working Group is working to distribute the Volkswagen penalty funds that were millions of dollars given to the state to put charging stations in different communities. Haines is been awarded a charging station from the Juneau Economic Development Council. And so the Haines Economic Development Council is working to find a place for that charging station and start to bring electric vehicle into the Chilkat Valley. Juneau's getting public buses now that are electric. School buses are on the way. School buses in Tok are electric. They save money. They have a lot of advantages, and they offer a lot of stability to a grid too. And I can't go into much detail on that, but just a little snapshot of another way to move these fossil fuel intensive energy sectors into the clean hydroelectricity sector and displace more oil and keep more of our money in our economies. Excuse me, wrong way. And so I would say there are good reasons to electrify your life. There's the safety issue of not using combustion either for heat or transportation. Some folks talk about the security of not having to worry about their fuel sources, the liability of oil tank failures, air source heat pumps. All heat pumps have sort of superior air quality characteristics. They circulate air and filter air. It's certainly cleaner than a furnace or a wood stove. So folks who have air quality issues, indoor air quality can be a really important value for people that's well worth every nickel they spend on it. The ease of operation, you can walk away from them, come back, in the spring and turn them on. They're cheap to operate and maintain, whether you're talking about heat pumps or electric vehicles. And there's potential savings depending on your local energy rates. So here's some of the good reasons to electrify our life in Haines and across the state. Keep pushing the wrong button. And there are challenges and downsides. These are new technologies. Not all of them are perfect and proven. But there are plenty of problems associated with all energy technologies, including renewable energy. And we can and should talk honestly about the trade-offs always. I guess I would sort of boil it down by saying the sort of simple steps that we can take as a community toward being more sustainable is seek energy efficiency as a priority wherever we can, invest in beneficial electrification efforts, and engage with the Haines Economic Development Committee on their community energy planning efforts. They have just reinstituted an energy planning committee, and I was at their first meeting this last week. So I'm excited about these folks that are interested in bringing the community together to talk about the energy in town and to take a long-range planning perspective and see what we can do to use our energy better and take advantage of opportunities here in the region. And speaking of opportunities, at REAP, we do an awful lot of outreach, an awful lot of training, and awful lot of educational outreach for teachers and students and folks all across the state and across the region. And we used to just travel and go into classrooms and communities to do this. But the virtual world, as you well know, has allowed us to really expand our reach this way. We can get people that couldn't travel. We can get more information out there. And so we're constantly churning out courses and classes and trainings. And so here's one coming up shortly that has a couple of, it's sponsored in the YK area, but they invited everybody to attend. So I'm promoting it as well. And we have some of our folks from our Anchorage REAP office presenting at that. But home energy basics. What a great way to learn some simple ways to save energy in your home. You're guaranteed to save money. And then on the larger scale, maximizing energy savings opportunities for community facilities. Our schools, gymnasiums, community facilities use a lot of energy, and there's ways, simple ways and easier ways to save energy for those facilities too. So just a quick training on that, and just if you check the REAP website, you'll always see new opportunities coming up. And with that, I just want to say Gunas Chish. Thank you very much. And I'll stop my screen share.
Wow, that was really fantastic. Thank you so much, Clay, for that great presentation.
Very welcome.
Melissa put a question in here in the chat box. Did you get a chance to see that?
Yeah, I've been looking at the different reports. The peak oil task force report was something we referenced in our first energy committee meeting the other day. I haven't seen that particular one, but I imagine these reports are, the folks in that committee were aware of it, and so I look forward to seeing those. Yeah, most of my work prior to this work was helping folks with deciding what to do about that biomass district heat facility. And so most of my reading prior to this was about the planning they put into that. And the heat pumps at the cannery. Yeah, there you go. There's the testimonial you need. All you got to do is hear from somebody that knows, and then people catch on. The thing we're running into is finding enough people in the region who can do the work to install them. It's not without, I mean, it's simple enough to do, but the refrigerant is highly regulated and technicians have to do the installations for that reason.
Okay, great. Well, we have our final presenter, Mardell Gunn. And Mardell considers herself a Hanes old-timer. She's been in Hanes for 25 years, although she says she still continues to actively learn more about this area. She grows a large percentage of the food she eats and is very active in the local food movement. She co-hosts KHNS's Garden Talk and is encouraging of new gardeners and more than willing to share her knowledge. Thank you for being here, Mardell.
Thank you, Tracy. Wow, how interesting and inspiring to hear all of this stuff about sustainability. Man, when Tracy asked me to talk about sustainability and gardening and food preservation, I realized that it could go in dozens of different ways, and I had to pick one. And so I did. I picked a passion of mine, and I'm going to talk about it in regards to food preservation and how we use food. Because, and then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about just some practical things with garden sustainability and actually doing gardening in sustainable practices. Why I picked this is I have a passion with food wastage. It really, it's awful for me to think that 40% of our food is wasted in this world. And I'm very happy that Jenny is doing a composting thing, but I wish that we didn't have that to do. And so I don't feel like I can maybe be instrumental, but my thing is not going into the school and stopping food wastage. But I can encourage people to figure out how can I do it best in my own home. And so those are some of the things that I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight. And some of the ideas you will say, oh, no way, that doesn't fit my family at all. Or there might be a little tidbit that you can take and utilize. And so one of those that I will say is don't throw away food. When you go to the work of making a dish or making food, don't throw it away. If you've got extra and you're not going to eat it as leftovers, don't put it in the refrigerator and wait for it to rot. Put it in a little container, put it in the freezer. There's going to come some time that you need to have a quick meal. You don't feel like cooking anything. And a lot of people don't think about that. They think, oh, well, it's old. I'm not going to eat the leftovers. So that's one thing I will say. And the second thing is very little food gets wasted in our house because I have a refrigerator kitchen soup that I make. And I find that those are some of the best soups because you're getting flavors from all of those foods that you put together, and they usually taste pretty good. You can add other things. So like Tracy said, we do grow most of our own, I shouldn't say most of our own food. We grow a lot of our own food, all of our vegetables. I don't ever buy vegetables, but I do buy grains and beans. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I have such a hard time seeing food wasted, because when you grow your own food, those of you who do it know it's much harder to throw out something that you have grown yourself. Your own blood, sweat, and tears is in that. And then another component of sustainability of growing your own food is also that the whole transportation piece is gone. Unless it falls out of your basket or out of your arms, going between the house and going between your garden and the house, there's no transportation. And so it's better nutrition, as well as that whole big piece that is so unsustainable of transporting our food all over the place. So, but even with gardeners, I see food wastage. I'll admit mine is I grow too much lettuce. And lettuce is one thing that is hard to preserve. I haven't figured out how to do it, at least. And so my goal this year is to grow a little bit less lettuce so I don't have to throw it away. In other people's gardens, it's not infrequent for me to go in and see broccoli that's gone to seed. It's a really easy, it goes to seed really fast. It's really easy to miss. Or cucumbers that have gotten too big is another one that I see pretty often. Or kale, kale and chard are really easy to grow here. So it's easy to grow too much of one thing. What I say to that is I encourage you to do small amounts. A lot of people think, oh, I have to have a whole head or maybe 2 heads of broccoli to put it in the freezer. You do not need to. Take that little bit of broccoli. If you start to see it go into seed, take it out of your garden, take 3 minutes to chop it up, parboil it or steam it a little bit, 2 or 3 minutes, and then stick it in your, I'll use plastic bags. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. However you freeze it. You don't have to have a whole bag of broccoli to put in the freezer. Put a little bit in. And then next time you go out to the garden, you've got something that needs to be put in, put that in as well. I started doing that and realized that was my favorite vegetables to take out of the freezer. I now do bags of mixed vegetables, and then I can just take those out and put them in soups or in casseroles or whatnot. So don't think that you need to have nice, neat little organized bags of this is my peas and this is my corn. Don't have to do that. So plastic bags, that's a question, or it's a topic of controversy, I guess, or to me, I think it's just different people do it differently. If I went to using all glass jars in my freezer, I'd have to have a whole nother freezer at least to contain all that we put in. I put hundreds of bags in the freezer every year. My answer to this is I reuse the bags over and over and over. Some of my bags are 15 years old. I know that because I keep the date on them. I say what they are. And then when they get too crowded, I can't read it anymore. I take a piece of masking tape and I put on there. The curse and the blessing of plastics is that they last forever. And so the bad thing is that they last forever, but the good thing is that they last forever. You get to use them if you're somewhat careful with them. And also I've learned that you don't have to have something perfectly airtight unless it's fish you need to, but vegetables, they don't have to be perfectly airtight. If you're going to use them that first year. Now, if you're going to plan on leaving them in your freezer, then you have to worry about that a little bit more. So reuse your plastic bags over and over. The other thing that I do is I put a lot in a plastic bag. I don't do just a small little amount so that I take out a bag of kale and use it for making one meal. I pack all of my bags full of whatever is in them. And then when I get ready to use them, I take the bag out and I take out what I need. It does break. Don't pack them in so tight that they don't break apart easily, is my words of advice. But that's another way that I feel like I'm using plastic bags, but I'm being as sustainable as possible with using it. Let's see. Freezing is my choice because I have a freezer and it's easy for me to do. But for some people who don't have electricity or who have a freezer in a neighbor's garage rather than their own sitting, that may not be so easy. And so then there's canning. For me, canning takes more resources because I have to have the lids. It takes propane to do all of that. So my first choice is freezing. My second choice is drying. Drying actually amazingly retains a fair amount of nutrients. It looks like you wouldn't have any nutrients in that food. The truth of the matter is that it's pretty good. It's better than canning in most situations. So it's also a really good for those who live in small places. You can condense your food down to very little space. And so I have jars of dried kale, dried chard, dried all of these different things. Some people bring them down to a powder. I leave them flakes. That's how I personally like it. I think that those are really healthy things to do for if you're eating something that doesn't have a whole lot of nutrients, like maybe macaroni and cheese or something like that. If you sprinkle some dried veggies on it, you're giving yourself a huge nutrition boost, or your kids a huge nutrition boost. So that's a really good way to use dried veggies. I also dry zucchini. A lot of us have, those who are gardens have a lot of extra zucchini. Zucchini dries really well. I grate it and dry it, and then I slice it and dry it, either way. And then I throw that into soups. It's a good way to use that. Another thing I'll talk about with drying is one of the things that I have learned about not having food wastage is you got to figure out how you are going to use food. You need to make it, for a lot of people, if you've got a family and you've got 3 kids demanding your energy, you don't have time to do the same thing that I might be able to do not having kids around. So you need to figure out what works for you and what everybody likes. So one of the things that works in my family and how our lifestyle is, we use a lot of dried instant soups. So when I get ready to go out on a ski, we would need to take a lunch. And I like to be able to just put a dried soup mix in my thermos and add hot water, and I have an instant soup, and it's hot 3 hours later when I'm skiing or snowshoeing. If you buy those, they're expensive, and also who knows what's in them. So a lot of people don't know it's really, really easy to make your own soups and dry them. The best ones are a pureed soup, like a bean or a potato leek or something like that. But you can also do ones that have small chunks. Don't try to do one that's got really big, huge chunks, because they don't rehydrate very well. But small chunks of stuff is fine. Split pea soup works great. Make it, measure out how much you need. Mine uses 2 cups. I put that amount only, measure it out first, put that amount on your dehydrator mat or silicone mat in a low oven, you can do it. And then when it's dry, take it out, put those dried pieces in a blender, puree them up, and they become a powder. And that's what makes it instant. That powder, then you add the hot water, and voila, you've got an instant soup. So that is one thing that works for me, and I thought I'd pass it on and see if it works for anybody else. Another thing that I do is I have figured out that I love to cook, but there are times that I just want to have something fast, and we all like fast food. It's why the freezer, you go into Hauser's and there's a whole bank of freezers. It's full of fast foods. Obviously somebody's buying that. And you can make your own. And the way I do that is in the summer, I have a lot of food in the summer, and I will make a big, like double or triple the amount of green beans or cauliflower. And I eat it for that meal. And then I take the other half and I put it in the freezer. And that's my fast food that I don't have to think about. I take out of the freezer in the middle of the winter and I have it done. My favorite things to do that with is roasting. Roasted Brussels sprouts are awesome that way. Roasted cauliflower, roasted broccoli. That's one of the ways I like to do it. Or curried things. Also curried stays really nice flavor in the freezer. So again, one of the things that I also hear from a lot of gardeners is that, oh, well, I put a lot of chard and kale in the freezer and it's still there in the spring. That's food wastage, folks. If you're not going to use it, it's still food wastage. Ginny does not need that in her compost. And so think about that and don't stop growing, but figure out a way to make it that you're going to use it. Maybe it's that you need to change your habits. I used to not like greens at all. You wouldn't even consider eating kale, but my tastes have changed. So it's not, some of it is you need to change your habits, and some of it is you just need to figure out ways that it's easier for you and better to use. So that's kind of my thing on food. And now I want to spend just a couple minutes on sustainable practices in the garden. And of course, the big thing with that is plastics. Those of us who are gardeners know that we use a lot of plastics and poly products in our gardens. And the more we can cut down on that, the better, of course. But we do live in a climate where, in my opinion, we need to use them some. And so my way of dealing with that is make them last as long as possible. Do not think that just because your Rime, which is made out of poly, it's a fossil fuel, just because you got a little rip in that doesn't mean you have to throw it out. I use tape, which of course is a poly product too, but I use tape to cover the small holes, and I've taken them to my sewing machine and sewed them up. It's possible to do. Let's see, that my brain is just going. One of the things that I wanted to say at the beginning of this about sustainability, I think in our culture, sustainability is oftentimes likened to being cheap. And so this is what made me think about this. Oh, she's sewing up her Rime. How cheap is she? Well, I'm not doing it only because I want to save money. I'm doing it because I believe it's the right thing to do. And I think we as a culture need to start talking about it, especially around children. We need to let people know that, oh, you don't have to be ashamed about saving your rime or about using your plastic bags for 15 years. I think that that's a cultural transition that we're in the process of making. And I think that we can all do that in our daily lives of maybe shifting our own brain about it and then being able to talk about it with other people, and especially kids growing up. So I'm about to make a fertilizer order, and I thought, oh, Mardell, here you are talking about sustainability. Why are you bringing in fertilizers from who knows where? So how do I not do that much? One is I use my own compost as much as possible. And if you don't have your own, go to Jenny's and get hers. I used to get in azomite. I used to bring in azomite, which is full of trace minerals. I believe, without having it tested, so I'm kind of talking through my hat with this, but my intuition is that the glacial till we get at 19 Mile, that's an easy place to get it. It's any place that you can get glacial till. I get it at 19 Mile, is full of minerals and trace minerals that come from our rocks. So that's what I use instead of azomite, unless there's some place that I really know needs something, I might use azomite. But I put that glacial till in just about everything, especially in a bed that I'm going to grow beets in that needs boron, and there seems to be boron in it. The other thing, this is one of the last things I'm going to say, is the other thing I've taken to doing is, rather than ordering mycorrhizae that comes in bottles and plastic containers, is I go out into the forest and I bring in forest stuff from the forest. I act like a badger, and I just go in, I dig out those trees, the old trees. And I actually kind of like doing it. It gives me kind of great joy pulling up soil out of these old dead trees. And you'll see all sorts of white mycorrhizal fibers in there. And am I getting the right ones in my soil? I honestly don't know. But I honestly don't know if I'm getting the right ones when I order them from Gardener's Supply either. I know that I'm getting more fungus in my beds. That has definitely shown up, and that is healthy for plants. So I'm doing that. Those are kind of the things that I'm doing to decrease my use of bringing in amendments. One other thing is, I'm not doing this yet, but some people are using craft paper as a weed mat. Craft paper dissolves, and it's very recyclable, or not recyclable, compostable. And what I've taken to doing is, some of you probably know as gardeners, my little trick to keep root maggots at bay is I put a ring of quilt batting around my the stems of my brassicas. And for years, I used quilt batting, and that's synthetic stuff. And suddenly, I think it was Leslie Downer actually who gave me the idea. She says, they do make wool and cotton quilt batting. And it was like, ding, that's what I should be using. So now I use the wool and the cotton quilt batting. Does the same thing. You put it right around the stem. It keeps the root maggots from being able to lay their eggs on the stem. So that's my latest sustainable practice, sustainable change. So, okay, that's a whole bunch of ideas put in one time, and I'm done.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Marta. I wrote down a whole bunch of ideas.
Good.
I found that very helpful.
Good.
There were a few questions here. Do you believe that freezing is the best way to preserve the nutrients?
From what I've looked, I am not a food scientist, but I have spent a little time looking this up because I want to get the most nutrition. I think that freezing is the best way because they're cooked the least amount. One of the things that I do to preserve the nutrition is, if you read in the books, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to pour cold water over your veggies to cool them down really rapidly and fast. That to me makes no sense, because you're washing all of the water soluble nutrition, not all of it is water soluble, but all of that is water soluble is going down the drain. That makes no sense to me. So what I do is I just put it in a wide colander and I let it air dry. And so that's my way. And then I put it in the freezer. Don't let them sit out, and get them down to room temperature, and then get them in the freezer right away. So that's, from my research, that's what I find is probably the most nutrition saving. But drying is in there as a close second from my research.
And Mardell, what do you use to dry vegetables?
I highly recommend, if you're going to do any very much drying at all, I highly recommend getting an Excalibur dryer. They're square. They have a good fan, which is really important to doing a good, thorough job of drying. There's other dryers that, and there's some that I know that are good that I don't know about, but believe me, I used bad dryers for many, many years, and you'd get one little corner that would dry and all of the rest of it would be still not dry. The Excalibur, it's more pricey than other ones, but it's been a really good investment for me. And so also because I dry my own soups and I do a lot of drying of backpacking food and that sort of thing, it's more than made up its worth, monetary worth, in just a few years.
Okay, and I have a question too, just a personal question, because I've heard about silicone freezer bags. Do you have any experience with those?
I don't. I use silicone for some things. I think Jenny, well, let me answer this, and then I'd be interested to hear what Jenny has to say about this. I use silicone mats a lot, and I use silicone. They're expensive. And so I put hundreds and hundreds of bags in the freezer every year. So it's kind of out of the question for me. And so I just use the Ziplocs. And let me tell you that with the hundreds of bags that I put in the freezer every year, I use a half a box of Ziplocs every year. That's all the Ziplocs that I ever use. That many go bad. So you can, I'm not getting rid of plastic completely, which maybe we should be aspiring to, but you can get by with very, very little. And I haven't talked to anybody who's used the bags. Jenny, have you?
Yes. So my thoughts on them are, if you like them, they're cute. If they make you happy, they're great. I got really into glass containers for the freezer that are square and like stack really well. And I just asked for them for my birthday for several years in a row because they make me happy. But it makes me sad that someone like Mardell, who is so sustainable in every possible way, has to say to us, like, I use plastic bags, but not that many, or like has to defend it at all, because it doesn't matter. Like, there is so much else in the world to worry about that I feel like we sometimes look at ourselves really closely and get upset and give our brain power that we could be using to, like, even just energy sustainability or like big corporations that need to be regulated on. Like, I think there's so many issues and we can't get distracted by that stuff. And if we're saving the vegetables that we grew in our garden, that's a win. So whatever you save them in, it's like, it just doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I've appreciated the conversation that it's all been sort of focused around waste and waste management and the ethos of waste and using things to their true and fullest value. It's so old school. I'm so glad it's coming back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am thrilled. I got to know Lydia a little bit last summer in the garden, in the Victory Garden. And it was probably one of the highlights of the whole experience for me, was to see teenagers really get this, and to have a passion, beginning to have a passion for it. And it really thrilled me when I heard them talk about what they're doing in the school when they see so much waste. And so it's a good thing I don't have to see that waste. It would really be hard for me to see. I walk through airports or walk through convention centers and I just have to shut down my eyes, because that's a really huge unnecessary. It's really unnecessary. It's not like that everywhere. Yeah. So anyway, I'm happy that it's being looked at.
Yeah, I think my generation or just the people I hang out with have realized or have been taught that our planet is not doing well under our care, and we need to take it upon ourselves as much as we can, even if it's just a little act to help sustain our planet.
Mhm. Yeah, on behalf of my generation to Lydia's generation, we're very sorry for the mess that we are leaving you. A lot of us have done,
Sorry.
yeah, a lot of us have done the best that we can. Thank you for organizing this, Tracy. Betsy had to leave because it's starting to snow and she's got to walk across Mud Bay in the dark and the snow and everything. So she's taken off, but she wanted me to convey her thanks to you. We started this off with kind of a goal setting idea of putting down ideas that you've learned this evening, and then thinking about how you can start to incorporate some of those, because it's really easy to talk about ideas and then not do anything about them. So hopefully everybody's found some good ideas that they can use in this. I know I'm going to be getting in touch with, particularly with Lydia and Jenny, probably tomorrow, just a fair warning, for information for this resource guide that I'm working on. I learned a lot tonight. Thank you.
And also, when I post this presentation, I'll get in touch with all of you through email, but because a lot of you do offer some services too, I'll just double check with you and make sure it's okay that I include maybe your email or your contact information so people know how to track you down. So does anyone else have any questions or comments, or want to talk about some of the things that they're doing? Maybe some of the folks who were listening in.
Hi, this is Burl. Can you hear me there?
Yep, we can hear you, Burl.
Through the Orchard Project, I've come to understand something that's a neat composting program or a direction in composting that seems to be fairly nicely fit to some of the resources that we have here. And it's about using chipped wood for composting. And basically it's focused on stems that are under about 2.5 inches in diameter, and principally deciduous, but not all. And yeah, it's just an interesting new it's not new, but it's a composting approach that uses a wood chipper, gas powered, or a PTO driven wood chipper, and would be a great use of our roadside Sitka alder and cottonwood and a willow. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Burl.
Imagine the benefits of chipping the wood like Burl is suggesting and using it as compost as opposed to open air burning and polluting the air. It's an easy choice.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of it around, that's for sure. And it's an interesting resource that we could expand.
I think AP&T gives away the wood chips that they make from clearing the road. If anyone knows that, correct me. And I think they have a waiting list, actually, which is great. I think people use it just in their gardens or for their own projects. So yeah, it's a good material.
All right, anyone else have anything they want to share?
I would just add, I guess, that the Sustainable Southeast Partnership, to which I belong, I mean, I'm obviously involved in the energy sector, but we have a food security wing of the group that is so engaged in so many of the topics you folks talked about here today, from food production and agriculture and growing your own food to subsistence gathering and cultural activities. And so the SSP is also a great sort of resource to tie into your your folks that you outreach to, they are very interested in food sustainability and food security in the region.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a great resource.
I have a question for Clay before we go. If an individual was interested in divesting from the grid, would you steer them towards solar or wind?
I would solar. Solar is becoming more and more affordable.
Yeah,
The problem with integrating solar, if you're on the grid, is that then you got to wrestle with your utility. It's not a seamless fit. But if you're all on your own,
cool. Thank you.
Jenny, there's a nice one to look at, is talking to Paul and Jeannie at the brewery and see what they've done with their solar hookup. Because there's not a net metering buyback program that can make the make the money come your way as a result of using power that you generate and put on the grid. We don't have that ability here legally. It's not quite as remunerative. But Paul and Jeannie just did it. They got a grant to do it in their case, but they're real glad they did and they feel real good about it.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, any kilowatt they don't have to buy is
Mhm.
good.
And from our experience, it's just remarkable. We have at our house, we have Irvin and Nancy Soggy's original solar panels that we bought from them 20 years ago. And they were 20 years old then.
Wow.
And they have never failed. They just keep running. So there's no moving parts. It's just this thing that works all the time.
Yeah. I love Haynes. What a great town.
Hey, Clay, did you say that I somehow it crossed my desk that there was going to be a webinar on heating pumps? And is that what you said was last night?
That was last night, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it recorded? Do you know?
It was recorded.
Okay.
AT&T recorded it, and I think that Alaska Heat Smart will probably host it. I'm not certain. But I'd asked the folks from last night to let me know when they had it ready and to send me the link, and then I can share it around.
I would be very interested in that because I meant to do it and I just missed it. So
Sure.
Yeah.
And I was there and paid very close attention. Feel free to reach out to me anytime you have any questions, and I can.
okay. I'm almost so novice at it that I don't know the right questions to ask. I feel like I need to have some information to get my questions generated. So I thought the webinar was going to be a great way to do that. So, okay, I'll follow up on that. Thanks.
All right, well, it's getting kind of late.
Okay, so could I ask a question?
Oh, yes, please, Joni, yes, ask a question.
Okay, so what is the break-even point if you are a senior and you wanted to go to any of these renewable energy sources? What would be the break-even point? How many years would that break even?
Oh, I understand your question. Return on investment.
Right.
It's sort of a moving target, and it kind of depends on where you are. In a place like Juneau, where the electricity is cheap, and comparatively oil is higher, then the return on investment is sooner. In places where the electricity is high and the price of oil is low, the return on investment takes longer. That's just it's. And it can change the minute the price of oil goes up, then your return on your investment goes up.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
But for a heat pump, it's not unusual to get your return on investment here in Juneau in anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Okay.
Another thing to think about, Joni, is a home energy audit, if those still exist. Because then what you can look at is you can get at very reasonable, a good analysis of your home and easy ways to do energy conservation. So
Yeah, I did that several years ago. I had all that energy work done at my house after the audit.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can save you a lot of money pretty quickly
Uh-huh.
without a lot of infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else before we call it a night? Okay, well, presenters, thank you again so much.
You, Tracy.
I definitely benefited quite a bit from this presentation, and yeah, and I'm just so inspired by all these amazing things that are going on in Haines, and all these great resources that we have. So thank you to each and every one of you for making time tonight to just share your skills and your resources. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.